Hey, friend, welcome back to the YouTube channel for the Renaissance English History Podcast. I am your host, Heather, and I've been podcasting on Tudor England since 2009, which makes my show the original Tudor history show. This channel is where I put all of my episodes from all of my different shows, as well as tons of extra content like this video right here. Today, we are going to talk about a topic that is not for the faint of heart. We are going to talk about surgery, Tudor surgeries. So I was thinking about this. My dad is having a pacemaker put in today. He's had a lot of heart issues. He's getting older. He had a triple bypass. So today he's getting a pacemaker. So I was thinking about surgeries and I was thinking about surgery in the Tudor period. And so here we are. This video is the result. Before we get started with that, though, just a quick reminder, if you're not already subscribed to this channel and you want to see more Tudor history in your YouTube feed, who doesn't, go ahead and hit subscribe now so you never miss a video that we put out. All right, so surgery in the Tudor period was not for the faint-hearted. There was no anesthesia, no antibiotics, not even a concept of germs so much like we would know. So even the simplest procedures could be excruciating and often deadly. I remember reading Samuel Pepys's diary. He wrote about the experience of having a kidney stone removed in, I guess, the 1650s. Oh, he almost died. And yeah, not a lot of fun. A skilled surgeon might save a patient's life, but just as often, the cure was as bad as the disease. Amputations, crude attempts at cataract surgery, all performed with very basic tools, and survival was often just a matter of luck. But despite the brutality, Tudor surgeons were not entirely ignorant. Their knowledge was built on medieval traditions, drawing from ancient texts, Arab medical advances, and battlefield experiences. So, who were Tudor surgeons? What exactly did they do? Let's take a look. To understand Tudor surgery, we have to look back at its medieval foundations. English medicine in this period relied heavily on classical texts, particularly Galen and Hippocrates, whose theories on the four humors, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile, dominated medical thought. Surgeons were expected to balance these humors, sometimes using surgery as a last resort when other treatments failed. Medieval medical texts like the Trotula, which was a collection of writing on women's health in particular, and Bald's Leechbook, which was an Anglo-Saxon medical compendium, contained remedies from herbal poultices to primitive surgical procedures. These were practical guides rather than scientific breakthroughs, but they reflected the growing importance of hands-on medical knowledge. But some of the most advanced surgical techniques actually came from the Islamic world. Physicians like al-Zarawi, a 10th century Arab surgeon, developed surgical instruments that would still be used centuries later, things like scalpels, forceps, and catgut sutures for stitching wounds. Avicenna's Canon of Medicine, translated into Latin in the 12th century, also provided a systemic approach to surgery and influenced European medicine well into the Tudor period. Arab surgeons understood cauterization, blood circulation, even basic anesthesia using sponges soaked in opium or mandrake. And what's so interesting is by the Tudor period, after the fall of Constantinople, these texts are starting to make their way up to the Tudor surgeons, to the Tudor doctors and physicians. So there is starting to be this understanding of some of these Arab developments. But for most people at this point, these medical techniques and advances hadn't yet made their way through. So the average Tudor surgeon had little access to advanced medical knowledge and often relied on crude tools and risky procedures. While European scholars were rediscovering ancient surgical methods, England was lagging behind, clinging to medieval practices that often did more harm than good. Unlike physicians who studied at universities and focused on diagnosing illnesses, surgeons were considered lower status practitioners. Many were actually barber surgeons. So you would combine hair cutting with bloodletting, tooth pulling, and minor surgical procedures. Can you imagine that? You go get your hair cut and get your tooth pulled at the same time, or have like a little minor surgery in between your hair trim. The iconic red and white barber's pole that we see today actually has its origins from this period. The red symbolized blood, and the white represented bandages. Surgeons did not receive a formal education in medicine, but they trained through apprenticeships, learning by doing rather than through academic study. The Company of Barber-Surgeons, formally established in 1540 under Henry VIII, attempted to regulate the profession, but standards varied widely. While some surgeons became highly skilled, others were little better than butchers with a sharp knife. Outside of barber surgeons, there were itinerant healers and midwives who performed minor surgical procedures, such as lancing abscesses, setting bones, or even crude forms of cesarean sections, though, of course, survival was incredibly rare. Battlefield surgeons working under horrendous conditions gained valuable experience in amputations and wound care, but their techniques were often more about speed than precision. What kinds of surgeries did Tudors have? Well, surgical procedures in Tudor England were typically desperate measures performed with little understanding of hygiene or pain relief. If a person needed surgery, it was usually because all other options had failed and the results could be horrifying. You would have amputations, perhaps the most infamous of Tudor surgeries. Amputations were performed without anesthesia using saws and knives. A skilled surgeon could remove a limb in under a minute, but without antiseptic, infection was a major killer. Cauterization, pressing a red hot iron against the wound, was the preferred method to stop bleeding, though it often led to sepsis. Then there was trepanning, which involved drilling or scraping a hole into the skull, usually to relieve pressure from head injuries or to release bad humors, believed to cause madness or even epilepsy. While shock and infection killed patients, remarkably, some survived and even lived for years with gaping holes in their skulls. Could also have a bladder stone removal. This surgery was dreaded by all. Stones were extracted through an incision in the perineum, the area between the legs, a procedure so agonizing that it was often done in just a few minutes to minimize suffering. The risk of fatal infection was extremely high. Then there was cataract surgery, needling. Those with cataracts might undergo couching, a technique in which a sharp needle was used to push the clouded lens out of the patient's line of sight. There was no guarantee of improved vision, and infection or total blindness often followed. I'm really squeamish about eye stuff. Ugh. Tooth extraction. There were no dentists, of course, as we know them today. Tooth pulling was a service offered by barbers, blacksmiths, and even executioners. Make a little money on the side in between executioners if the crime wave wasn't going on, if things were peaceful. And why not pull some teeth? It was a violent procedure. Teeth were often broken off rather than cleanly removed, and there was no treatment for resulting infections. See a pattern here? There's a lot of infection happening. There was also wound treatment. Battlefield wounds were treated with whatever was available. Some Tudor surgeons used wine as an antiseptic, an idea borrowed from Arab medicine. Others relied on cauterizing the wound. French surgeon Ambroise Paré discovered that turpentine, egg yolk, and oil worked better than cauterization, a major innovation that some English surgeons later adopted. Surgical instruments were terrifying. Rusty saws, knives, and even hammers were used in the absence of delicate tools. Hygiene did not exist, and many operations took place in very unsanitary conditions, with surgeons wiping their blades on their aprons before moving on to the next patient. I remember the movie Glory, the Civil War movie, came out when I was in high school, about the 1st Black Regiment, the 54th, right? The 54th Massachusetts. And I remember there was a scene in the very opening showing, I think it was after one of the early battles. Can't remember right now. But anyway, there was a scene showing battlefield surgeons, and they were like rinsing their knives off in like pans that were bloody already from other people. And it was just this scene of showing that. It was just like, ugh. Sometimes I think I'd like to go back in time, and other times I think, no, I'm really good right here. Anyway, let's talk about survival rates and pain management, why don't we? Undergoing surgery in the Tudor period meant experiencing the full force of pain, really without a lot of relief. I mean, there was things like opium, but anesthesia as we know it did not exist. Opium, mandrake root, and alcohol were used to dull pain, but they were unreliable, often administered in insufficient doses. There wasn't any kind of clear dosing. Most patients were held down by assistants and expected to endure the procedure with nothing but sheer willpower. Thank you, no. The biggest killer wasn't always the surgery itself, it was blood loss and infection. With no knowledge of modern germ theory, surgeons operated with unwashed hands and reused instruments caked in dried blood. Arteries were cauterized with red hot irons to stop bleeding. This, like I said, often led to sepsis. If the wound didn't kill you immediately, the infection likely would. Yet some people actually survived against all odds. Battlefield surgery provided grim but valuable experiences, and records exist of men enduring multiple amputations and living to tell the tale. One French soldier who had his arm removed by Ambrose Pare recovered due to the surgeon's innovative use of ligatures instead of cauterization, a practice that Tudor surgeons eventually adopted. Though survival rates were shockingly low, every success laid the groundwork for future improvements. Despite its brutality, Tudor surgery was evolving, shaped by war, regulation, and Renaissance science. One of the most influential figures in the advancement of surgery in Northern Europe, like I said, was this Ambrose Pare, a French surgeon who revolutionized battlefield medicine. Instead of cauterizing, he developed ligatures, the tying off of blood vessels to control bleeding. He introduced a gentler wound treatment, like I said, this mixture of egg yolk, rose oil, and turpentine, which dramatically improved healing compared to the standard practice of pouring boiling oil onto wounds. Though his methods were controversial, they eventually gained acceptance across Europe, including in England. In England, Thomas Vickery, who was Henry VIII's royal surgeon, compiled one of the most detailed Tudor-era anatomy books, a profitable treatise in the anatomy of man. This book aimed to educate surgeons of the human body, though much of its content was still based on medieval ideas. A major turning point came in 1540 when Henry VIII formalized the Company of Barber-Surgeons, merging London's two main surgical guilds. This was an attempt to regulate and professionalize the field, ensuring that at least some surgeons had proper training. However, barber surgeons remained distinct from physicians and were still considered a lower class profession. One of the biggest shifts in Tudor medical knowledge came from the Renaissance emphasis on human dissection. The most important anatomical work of the period was Andreas Vesalius's De Humani Corpus Fabrica from 1543, which corrected centuries of misinformation based on animal dissections. While England lagged behind the continent in adopting these ideas, by the late 16th century, more English surgeons were learning from direct observation rather than medieval texts. Another driver of progress was war. Conflicts in France and Scotland provided surgeons with extensive, if gruesome, experience. Battlefield medicine required quick amputations and innovative wound treatments, leading to improved speed and technique. While survival rates were still low, Tudor surgeons were gradually refining their craft, learning from each operation, even if their patients often paid the price. So, surgery in the Tudor period was a brutal, often fatal affair, but it was not entirely stagnant. Many procedures were still rooted in these medieval traditions, but the period also saw the first steps towards modern surgical techniques. The influence of Pare, Vickery, and Renaissance anatomical studies helped surgeons to gain a better understanding of the human body. The creation of the Company of Barber-Surgeons attempted to reinforce some standards, and wartime necessity pushed surgeons to improve their speed and efficiency. But of course, it was still a matter of luck. So, I'm not signing up for any surgery from any Tudor barber surgeon anytime soon. So, I'm a hard no thank you on that. What do you guys think? Are you glad we live in the time of modern medicine? Sometimes I think about it and I think we tend to see ourselves so advanced, like science is advanced everything. And I think we lose a lot of the mystery and the magic of life with this idea, this enlightenment idea that everything has an answer and everything can be solved with science and everything like that. So, I tend to kind of like skirt a little bit of the woo-woo world and a little bit of the spirituality world and would like us to bring some of that back. And every time I start thinking that too much, then I just remember medicine. I'm just so grateful that I live now. I don't know, maybe in a past life, I had some kind of horrible eye experience, and that's why I'm so squeamish about that. Have you ever had a past life reading done? I'm just curious. Um, I have had one done, and I learned a lot of very interesting things about my potential past lives. Was a psychic in Camden that told me all about myself, but not sure how much of it I believe, but it was certainly really interesting, and it explains a lot. So that got sidetracked. And anyway, hey, if you got to the end of this video and you enjoyed it, I sure would appreciate a press of that like button. You know what it does. It feeds that algorithm and gets our content to even more people. I hope I earned your subscription to my channel where I put out content like this on the regular. Thanks so much for watching. If you want to keep binging Tudor medical content, here's a video from Seamus Acali on Henry VIII's medical conditions. You might enjoy that. Here's a video that YouTube thinks you'll like. Thanks for being here. Thanks for your time. Remember, you are deeply loved. I'm so glad I share the planet with you. I'll be back soon, and don't forget to drink your water. All right, friend. Have an amazing day. Bye-bye.